All right, so we are at a stage in our research paper where most of you have actually done your outlining. Most of you are pretty much done, like reading the research that you should have been reading the whole time and taking the notes in the way that I taught. Now we're at a point where we need to take our outline and we need to start converting it into the actual final paper. So I have added a step number 9 to the research paper process, and what I need for you to do is to go ahead and click on that, and you'll see that there's an assignment called Lesson on Thesis Writing and Body Paragraphs. And when you click on it, it shows the due date of tomorrow, but it says you will need this CAMI document for today's lesson. What I'd like for everybody to do at this point is to go ahead and open up that CAMI document so that you have access to it. So because I am teaching live in front of an actual audience here, I hope that they all have it open. So one of the things about this research paper is we've gotten the most difficult part of it over with. The most difficult part of it is, one, reading stuff. Reading research that's believable and citing information and keeping track of what we've read in a systematic way. So that's the first part. That's the most difficult part, is reading up on stuff and then taking notes with parentheses and things like that. And then the second thing is then giving credit where credit is due, following MLA format, with having a works cited page and having parentheses with the information that you need after each note that you've been taking. So those are the most tedious parts of the research paper. But because this is an informative research paper, this is where I think things get easier. At this point, we need to actually write our thesis. Now, our thesis isn't really hard to write because the purpose is to inform. So you're not making an argument. You're actually just informing your audience. And so you're answering one question. And that question that you're going to answer for your thesis in the form of one sentence is, who is the person you researched for your essay and why are they important? Literally, you're going to take and you're going to write your thesis by filling in the blanks here. So if you research Jesse Owens, you'll be like, Jesse Owens is important in history because, and then you should have some general things and reasons that made him important, and there's your thesis. If you researched Alvin Ailey, you're like, Alvin Ailey is important in history because. If you researched Alice Coachman, it's going to be Alice Coachman is important in history because. Or Ethel Waters, whoever it is that you chose, the same sentence structure is going to take place for this. And yes, it is a little monotonous, it is a little boring, but this is the first time that we've actually done a research paper from beginning to end in your entire life and done it correctly. So yes, we are writing a boring, insipid thesis. It's not argumentative. You're simply making a statement about the person's importance. Now, my students later on here are going to actually write their thesis just like this, but it says type your thesis into your outline where the introduction is located. So in the outline that I provided for you, you're going to go open up that document in a minute, and you're literally going to type where the bold lettering is. You're going to type your thesis exactly with that formula in mind. So that's step 1 of today's lesson. The second step of today's lesson then is, how do you write body paragraphs? And what I have provided then is, what do body paragraphs actually have to have? So we've been teaching the whole year that body paragraphs in any essay, or just body paragraphs, should be sandwiches anyway. There should be a top layer of bread, which is the topic sentence. There should be meat and cheese, which is important information or research about the person that you're researching. Also, for a research paper, there should be parenthetical citations. And we're going to go ahead and look at an example of that here shortly. You need to have more meat and cheese, which means more research. And it wouldn't hurt to have a third set of meat and cheese in your body paragraph. And then, of course, you have what is known as your bottom layer of bread, which is a closing sentence to your paragraph. So your paragraphs for this essay should all be individual sandwiches just like this. Now, you're going to have more than one sandwich per topic. You ought to have more than one paragraph sandwich for the biography. You should have more than one sandwich, more than one paragraph for the second section, which is what did that person do that made them in history. Now, the third one is a little bit shorter, but you should at least have one sandwich in which you explain why this person is still important today. But basically, you're going to be serving up a whole bunch of sandwiches that have a top layer of bread, which is the topic sentence, that has meat and cheese, which is your research, and explained in a way that you can easily follow. And then you're going to have a closing sentence, which is the bottom layer of bread that makes each sandwich. So to illustrate this, I actually wrote a paragraph that I didn't really vet yet, but we're going to take a look at it for the sake of this video. So following along, I actually wrote a paragraph. This is a paragraph that I wrote using research that is similar to the research that my students did. As it turns out, none of my students chose Mae Jemison as the subject of their paper, so I decided to write a paragraph. What we have here then is long before Mae Jemison became a world-renowned astronaut, her childhood started with humble beginnings. So now, this is easily a good example of the top layer of bread. And I'd like my students to follow along and mark that up because you're going to be writing your own bread, meat, and cheese and stuff like that. So the second thing then is, well, first, and I'm going to go back to my drawing thing. First, and this is why we used transitions earlier in the year. First, she was born in 1956 in Decatur, Alabama, and she was the youngest of 3 children in her family. And notice I said you had to have parenthetical citations. Notice I'm giving credit where credit is due by having the citation there. And I'm going to show you the sources that I used here shortly. But this is an example of meat and cheese. And in fact, I'm going to label it as such. Meat, cheese. Okay? So I'm following then the paper again. Her father, Charlie Jemison, was a roofer, and her mother, Dorothy Jemison, was an elementary school teacher. I'm going to change color codes, but this is yet another example of meat and cheese. We are giving information, and notice too that we are giving credit where credit is due. Thus, she had a lot of support from her family as she pursued her education, and thus she chose to become a medical doctor and study science. Once again, following this rule, we have yet another serving of meat and cheese. And I don't need to type a new addition here, but you see we've got meat and cheese, meat and cheese, meat and cheese. Following along then, and I'm going to change the color code again. As a child, she had dreams of becoming an astronaut, and she said, I thought about that little girl who grew up wanting to go into space, and so the first thing to happen to me there was this huge smile when she got to space. And once again, this is more meat and cheese. We're giving credit where credit is due, credit where credit is due, credit where credit is due. And then that brings us to the very last part. Therefore, and this is why we've been using transitional phrases the whole year. This is a nice logical concluding type of thing to end with. Therefore, from an early age, Jemison was interested in space and took her education seriously. And if I have to label what this is an example of the bottom slice of bread. And that is how you serve meat and cheese and meat and cheese and meat and cheese in body paragraphs. Now, that begs the question of, but what did my outline look like before I made this paragraph, right? So this is the final product that you're going to have to do, is you're going to have to serve these sandwiches. However, my outline actually looked like this. And what you'll see in my outline, and you guys did your own outlines, is this was information taken from this source. This was taken from that source. This was taken from this source. This was taken from the third source. and so on. And look, there's one more bullet point. You'll also notice that I have a works cited page. So when you look at the parenthetical citations, you might happen to notice that, this was in parentheses for one of them. You'll notice this was in parentheses, although we removed the punctuation. This was in parentheses for the third source there. But basically, we have a works cited page. I had gathered my notes on her and had like things together. And basically, I took what I had written down and I put it into the form of a paragraph. And that is how you make body paragraphs in a research paper. You serve bread, meat and cheese, which is your information and citations, more meat and cheese, and then obviously you finish with a bottom layer of bread. That's how it's done, folks. I can't make it any easier for you.